"Can I clean your cabin for a piece of bread?" The question was a whisper on the wind, fragile as a dying leaf. But when the lonely rancher saw the native girl standing on his porch, he froze. The world stopped turning. The desert wind was a furnace blast across the parched Arizona territory. Out here the sun didn't just shine, it punished. The ranch house stood alone, a gray wooden box against an endless sea of red dust and jagged mountains. Smoke curled from the chimney, the only sign of life for 100 miles. And then she appeared. A ghost, stumbling out of the shimmering heat. Marina pressed a hand to her stomach. A hollow ache that had been her only friend for 3 days. Her dress was torn, her moccasins worn through to bloody feet. Her people were gone, scattered by soldiers. Now she was just alone. The ranch house was her last hope. The horses in the corral were fat and sleek. Someone here had food. Someone here had life to spare. Her legs screamed as she climbed the 3 steps to the porch. Her hand trembled as she knocked. The sound was swallowed by the vast emptiness of the desert. Inside, heavy boots on a wooden floor. The door creaked open. And there he was. Garrett Thorne. A man carved from the land itself, tall and broad, with lines on his face that told stories of hardship and loss. His gray eyes were usually cold, calculated, the eyes of a man who trusted nothing and no one. But the moment those eyes landed on Marina, something inside him shattered. The tin cup in his hand slipped, clattering on the wood planks. His face went slack, the color draining from beneath his tan. His mind wasn't in the cabin anymore. It was racing backward, 12 long years, to a memory he had buried under a mountain of grief. It was impossible. It couldn't be. But there she stood. The same high cheekbones. The same full lips. The same dark, deep-set eyes that tilted up at the corners. The very same eyes that had haunted his dreams for over a decade. This girl was younger, barely 20. And she looked at him not with recognition, but with the confused desperation of a starving stranger. Her skin was a shade lighter, her hair in 2 long braids decorated with turquoise beads that caught the last rays of the dying sun. Marina stared back at the frozen man. She had practiced her English, planned her words, but his reaction sent a jolt of fear through her exhausted body. He looked at her like she was a phantom risen from the dust. She forced the words out, her voice raw. "Please, sir. I can work. Just bread." She swayed, her hand gripping the doorframe to keep from collapsing. Garrett blinked, snapping out of his trance. He took a half step back, his hand instinctively moving toward the revolver on his hip before he caught himself. The cabin behind him was sparse, but clean. A stone fireplace, a rough table, a bed in the corner. It smelled of coffee and beans, a scent so powerful it made Marina's stomach clench in agony. His mind was a storm. The timing was all wrong. Maria had died 12 years ago, killed in a raid. He'd searched for her, searched for any sign of survivors, but found only ashes and blood. There had been no child. No one ever mentioned a child. And yet, here she was. A living, breathing echo of the only woman he had ever loved. The resemblance was too perfect, too absolute to be a coincidence. "How old are you?" The words came out harsh, an accusation. Marina flinched. 20 winters, she whispered. 20 years. The numbers slammed into his mind like a locked door kicking open. 20 years. He and Maria had been together 21 years ago. Young, reckless, breaking every rule that kept their 2 worlds apart. She had disappeared for months after. When she returned, she refused to see him. Her family formed a wall around her, and then came the raid, and then nothing. Just memory and ash. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. A single devastating truth washed over him. Maria had been pregnant. She had hidden it from him. She had protected him from a truth that would have gotten them both killed. And now, their daughter, was standing on his porch, starving, desperate, and looking at him like he was a complete stranger. "Come inside," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. Marina hesitated. She knew the stories. White men who lived alone in the wilderness were not to be trusted. But the hunger was a beast, roaring inside her, drowning out the whispers of caution. She took one step across the threshold, and her legs finally gave out. Garrett caught her before she hit the floor. His arms, strong as oak, wrapped around a frame that felt like it weighed nothing at all. She was just bone and will. He carried her to the bed, laying her down as gently as he could. Her eyes fluttered closed, the long fight finally over. He stood over her, frozen once more, a ghost in his own home. He looked down at the face that was a perfect, impossible blend of his and Maria's. The stubborn set of her jaw was his. The shape of her hands was his. But the grace, even in unconsciousness, was all her mother. The coffee pot hissed on the stove, pulling him back to the present. He moved like a man in a dream, ladling stew into a bowl, cutting a thick slice of bread. His hands were shaking. 20 years. 20 years he'd been a father and had never known it. 20 years Maria had carried that secret alone, all the way to her grave. Marina stirred, her eyes opening to the smell of food. She sat up, her body weak, but her spirit fighting. She saw the man by the table, his face a mask in the lamplight. But his eyes. There was something in his eyes. An emotion too deep, too intense for a stranger offering a simple kindness. "Eat slowly," Garrett said, his voice carefully controlled. "Your stomach can't handle much at first." She nodded, moving to the table. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the spoon. The first bite of warm stew was like a miracle. Salt, fat, substance. It had been so long. She forced herself to go slow, to fight the animal instinct to devour everything in sight. Garrett watched her from the shadows. How could he possibly tell her? How do you look at a grown woman and say, "I'm your father," a father who never knew you existed? Maria must have had her reasons. A half-breed child in this territory was a death sentence, a creature belonging to two worlds but welcome in neither. The lamplight played across the girl's face, highlighting the features he now saw so clearly. His own determination in her shoulders. Maria's grace in her every move. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. She looked up, bread halfway to her lips. "Marina." The name hit him like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole his breath. Maria's grandmother was named Marina. In the few stolen months they'd had together, Maria had sworn that if they ever had a daughter, that would be her name. She had kept her promise, even while she kept the daughter a secret. "Where are you from, Marina?" She swallowed. "Cañon del Muerto. My people lived there." He knew the place. It was where Maria's band had tried to live in peace before the world decided peace wasn't an option. 200 miles north. A brutal journey on foot. "Your family?" he asked, dreading the answer. Her face hardened. The pain was a flash of lightning in her eyes before she locked it away. "Gone. Soldiers came. 3 weeks ago. Said we had to move to the reservation. My mother." She paused, fighting for the English words, fighting the memory. "My mother told me to run. She stayed behind. To give me time." Garrett's chest tightened. It couldn't be Maria. The timelines were all wrong. Maria had been dead for 12 years. This was someone else. An aunt, maybe. Someone who had adopted her, raised her as her own. But the pain in Marina's eyes was fresh, a raw and bleeding wound. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were useless, pebbles against a mountain of grief. She just nodded, turning back to her food. When she was done, she drank a full pitcher of water, the discipline of survival etched into every motion. The wind howled outside, a lonely sound in the vast, dark desert. "You can't travel at night," Garrett said. It wasn't a suggestion. "The bed's yours. I'll take the floor." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion warring with exhaustion. White men who offered help usually wanted payment, a kind of payment she would die before giving. But this man? There was an old pain in his face that she recognized. It mirrored her own. "Why you help me?" she asked. her directness a weapon. Garrett turned away. He couldn't look into those eyes. Not right now. Everyone needs help sometimes. It wasn't the real answer. The real answer was a story of cosmic cruelty, of a fate that had brought his unknown daughter to his door, starving and alone. How could he tell her that he'd spent half his life mourning a woman who had secretly given him the one thing he never knew he wanted? Marina pushed her chair back. Her strength was returning, but with it came the heavy weight of bone-deep exhaustion. The bed was a siren's call, but trust was a currency she no longer possessed. "You promise?" she asked, her hand moving subtly toward the small knife hidden in her belt. "You stay there?" Garrett raised his hands slowly, palms open. "I promise. You're safe here." She studied his face, searching for the lie. She found none. With a final weary nod, she went to the bed. She took off only her moccasins, keeping the knife tucked under her pillow. Her eyes stayed locked on him as he laid a blanket pallet by the fireplace. The flames threw dancing shadows on the walls as he settled onto the hard floor. He'd slept in worse places, but the discomfort in his bones was nothing compared to the war in his soul. His daughter, his living, breathing daughter, was 20 feet away. And there was a universe between them. As her breathing slowed into the deep rhythm of sleep, Garrett lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams he'd hewn with his own hands. This cabin was supposed to be his fortress, his refuge from the ghosts of the past. And now a ghost had walked right through the door. And she had his eyes. The night was long and cold. Garrett's mind wouldn't rest. It drifted back 21 years. He remembered meeting Maria. He was 18, cocky, a boy who thought he could conquer the world. She was 16, spirited and beautiful, with eyes that saw right through his bravado. They met over a thrown horseshoe and a dusty corral, and in that moment, their separate worlds collided. Their love was a secret. Stolen moments in hidden canyons under a blanket of stars. She taught him her language, her stories. He told her of cities and oceans she could only dream of. They made foolish plans to run away, to build a life where the color of their skin didn't matter. Then she vanished. Her family moved their band without a word. When he finally found them months later, she wouldn't see him. Her father stood like a stone wall between them. "She has made her choice," the old man had said. "Respect it." Heartbroken and furious, Garrett had left. He joined the army, trying to outrun his grief. By the time he returned, it was too late. The village was gone. The people were gone. Maria's name was just a line of ink on a casualty list. He had built this ranch with his bare hands, pouring his guilt and rage into every log. He kept the world at arm's length. He preferred the silence, the isolation. It was safer that way. But the world had found him anyway. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. He heard Marina stir. She sat up slowly, her movements cautious, like a wild animal in a strange place. Their eyes met across the dim cabin. The silence stretched. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch. "You have much land," she said. Her English was a little clearer now, strengthened by food and rest. "Enough to keep busy," Garrett grunted, rising from his pallet. He moved to the stove, the familiar morning ritual a welcome anchor. He sliced bacon, cracked eggs, his hands moving with the efficiency of a man long accustomed to solitude. Marina watched him. This man was a loner. That much was obvious. Yet he had taken her in, fed her, given her his bed without question. The contradiction was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "I work today," she announced. "Clean for bread, like I say." He glanced at her. He saw the pride in her eyes, a fierce, unbending thing. It was Maria's pride, and it was his own stubbornness. To refuse would be an insult. "The place could use a woman's touch," he admitted. She nodded, satisfied. As she began to rebraid her hair, the small turquoise beads clicking softly, he felt another pang of memory. Maria used to do that, the same graceful, practiced movements. They ate in silence as the sun climbed higher. He showed her where the cleaning supplies were. She listened, her her mind sharp, cataloging everything. Then he went outside to his chores, needing the physical labor to quiet his thoughts. But his mind wouldn't quiet. Every few minutes he found himself looking back at the cabin, catching a glimpse of her sweeping, scrubbing. She moved with a relentless efficiency, her pride pushing her past the point of exhaustion. She was cleaning corners he didn't even know he had. By midday, she emerged onto the porch, wiping sweat from her brow. Color had returned to her cheeks, but she was swaying, gripping the railing for support. Garrett was there in an instant. "That's enough. You need to rest." "Not finished," she said, her jaw set. "Yes, you are. The place hasn't been this clean in years, but you're about to fall over." Their eyes locked. A silent battle of wills. His concern against her pride. Finally, her shoulders slumped. She was simply too weak to argue anymore. He guided her back inside to a chair, brought her a cup of water. Her hand trembled as she took it, and he saw her bite her lip in frustration at her own weakness. "I must go," she said quietly. "Cannot stay. Not proper." Panic seized him. He'd just found her. He couldn't let her walk back out into that desert. But the truth was a loaded gun, and he was terrified to pull the trigger. "Where will you go?" he asked instead. Her gaze drifted to the window, to the vast, unforgiving emptiness. "South. Mexico, maybe. My people say there are villages there that welcome our kind. That's 500 miles of hell. You won't make it. I have no choice." "Yes, you do," he said, his voice urgent. "Stay here. Work if you must. This ranch. It needs help, and you need a place to get your strength back." She turned, her dark eyes searching his face. Suspicion wrestled with a desperate hope. "Why? Why you care what happens to me?" The words were right there on the tip of his tongue. "Because you're my daughter. Because I failed your mother, and I will not fail you." "Because everyone deserves a chance," he said instead. "And I could use the help. The work's getting to be too much for one man." It was a half-truth. The real reason was sitting right in front of him, looking at him with her mother's eyes. She considered his offer. She was utterly alone. This stranger offered a safe harbor in a storm that had already drowned everyone she loved. But accepting it meant trusting him. "1 month," she said finally. "I stay 1 month. I work hard. Then I go." Relief washed over him, so potent it almost buckled his knees. 1 month, he agreed, keeping his face a mask of neutrality. "We'll see how it goes." They shook on it, her small, strong hand in his, a pact made between strangers who were anything but. The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Marina's strength returned bit by bit. She was a tireless worker, driven by a deep-seated need to earn her keep. She transformed his dusty, neglected garden into a thriving patch of green, using irrigation techniques her people had perfected over centuries. "My mother taught me," she explained, her hands shaping a small channel in the dirt. "We made the dry land give food." The mention of her mother was a constant, dull ache in his chest. Which mother? The one who gave her life, or the one who raised her? As they worked side by side under the brutal sun, a tentative trust began to grow between them. She was smart, a quick learner, with an innate understanding of the land. One afternoon, she paused, leaning on her shovel. "You are good man," she said, her gaze direct. "My mother." She said not all white men are bad. I did not believe her. "But you are different." Garrett's throat went dry. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Marina's voice went soft. "She teach me many things. How to survive. How to be strong. She always say, 'You are special, Marina. You have gifts from 2 worlds.'" She looked at him, confused. "I never understand. I am only Indian." The pieces were clicking into place, each one more painful than the last. Maria hadn't just hidden her. She had been preparing her, planting seeds of a truth she couldn't speak aloud. "Maybe she meant, you have the strength to bridge those worlds," Garrett offered, his voice strained. "To take the best from both and make something new." Marina frowned, considering this. "Maybe. She always says strange things. Look at me with sad eyes, like she carried a big secret. Garrett's heart was hammering against his ribs. He was so close. The truth was a breath away, but fear held him back. The fear of breaking the fragile trust they had built. The fear of changing everything. The week wore on. They repaired the barn roof, her fearlessness at heights matching his own. They built a better coop for the chickens. They fell into a comfortable routine, working together during the day, sharing stories on the porch at night as the stars came out. He learned about her people's legends, of Spider-Woman and Coyote. She learned about his travels, the carefully edited version. With every story shared, the invisible wall between them got a little bit smaller. But the secret was always there, a shadow in the corner of his eye. Then, on the 8th day, she asked the question that almost broke him. They were mending a fence line, the rhythmic pounding of his hammer the only sound. "You never marry?" she asked. "Never have children?" The hammer froze in his hand. "No. Never found the right person." She was quiet for a long moment. "My mother never married either," she said softly. "She loved someone once, but he was gone. And she could not love another." The hammer slipped from his numb fingers, clattering in the dust. He bent to pick it up, his back to her, fighting to control his breathing. When he straightened, she was watching him with a strange, curious intensity. "She must have loved him very much," he managed to say. "She did," Marina confirmed. "She keep his memory like a sacred thing. Sometimes I find her crying, holding something small in her hand. She never showed me what it was, but she held it, like a treasure." Garrett's hand moved unconsciously to his own chest. Beneath his shirt, on a leather cord, hung a small worn pouch. Inside was a single dark braid of hair, the one Maria had given him the last time he saw her. He hadn't taken it off in 21 years. "Maybe someday you'll understand," Marina said, her voice filled with an old sadness. "What it means to love someone so much that losing them changes everything." He met her gaze, his own ghost swirling in his eyes. "Maybe I already do." The 10th day was when everything changed. They were clearing out the old storage shed, a place Garrett hadn't touched in years. It was dark, cluttered, and filled with dust. And a rattlesnake. It struck without warning. A blur of motion, and a sharp, hissing sound. Marina cried out, jumping back, but she wasn't fast enough. The fangs sank into her calf. Time seemed to slow down. Garrett's world narrowed to a single point of focus. He brought the shovel down on the snake's head with a savage crack. Then he swept Marina into his arms and ran for the cabin. His hands shook as he laid her on the bed. A rattlesnake bite could kill a strong man. For someone still recovering from starvation, it was a death sentence. He grabbed his knife, held the blade in the fire until it glowed red. "This will hurt," he gritted out. She didn't cry. She just bit down on a piece of leather, her eyes squeezed shut, preparing for the pain. He sliced an X across the 2 puncture wounds. Then he lowered his head and began to suck the venom out, spitting the poison and blood onto the floor. Over and over, until he could taste nothing but clean blood. He poured whiskey over the wound, wrapped it tightly, and forced a bitter herbal tea between her lips. The next few hours were a living hell. Her leg swelled to twice its size. A raging fever took hold, and she began to drift in and out of consciousness, lost in a delirious haze. Garrett never left her side. He bathed her face with cool water, held her down when she thrashed, and prayed to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. In her fever dreams, she called for her mother, not the woman who had raised her. "Mama," she whispered, tears tracking through the grime on her cheeks. "Mama, I found him, the man with the kind eyes, the one you told me about." Garrett's blood ran cold. Maria had told her. She had left a trail of breadcrumbs, hoping, praying that one day they would lead her daughter home. "Papa," Marina murmured, her mind weaving past and present together. "Papa with the gray eyes. Mama said, you had storms in your eyes, but sunshine in your heart." His hand trembled as he wiped the sweat from her forehead. She knew, on some deep, primal level, she had known all along. Maria had armed her with the one thing she needed to recognize the father she'd never met. The fever broke just before dawn. Marina's eyes opened. They were clear, lucid. She looked at Garrett, slumped and exhausted in the chair beside her. Their gazes locked, and in the quiet of the new day, there was no need for lies anymore. "You are him," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. My father. The walls he had built around his heart for 20 years crumbled into dust. "Yes," he whispered. The word was a surrender, a confession, a beginning. She didn't seem surprised. It was as if the fever had burned away everything but the essential truth. "I think I know since beginning," she said, touching her chest. "Something in here. Recognize you." He fell to his knees beside the bed, taking her hand. It felt so small in his. "Your mother, Maria. We loved each other. But the world was against us. When she disappeared, I looked for her. They told me she was dead. No one ever said. No one mentioned a child." "She protect me," Marina said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And she protect you. A white man with an Indian child. They would kill you both." The brutal truth of it hit him like a physical blow. Maria's choice hadn't been about leaving him. It had been about saving him. She had sacrificed her own happiness to ensure his survival, and their daughters. "When I saw you on my porch," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I knew. You have her eyes, her spirit, but you have my hands, my stubbornness." Marina looked down at her own hands, really seeing them for the first time. "Always, I wonder why I'm different, taller, hands too big. Now I know." "You're perfect," he said fiercely. "You are the best of both of us." A weak smile touched her lips. "What we do now?" "Now," he said, squeezing her hand. "You rest. You heal. And then we figure out the rest of it. Together. You're my daughter, Marina. And you're home." In the days that followed, as her leg healed, the floodgates opened. They talked for hours, piecing together 2 decades of secrets and sorrow. He told her about their whirlwind romance, the stolen moments, the heartbreaking end. She told him about a childhood spent feeling like an outsider, a puzzle with a missing piece. "My aunt," Marina said one afternoon, propped up on the porch. "The one who raised me. Just before the soldiers came, she told me I must find my own path. She said, 'You are not meant for the reservation. You are meant for something more.'" "She knew," Garrett said. "She kept your mother's secret. She kept you safe. But their safety was a fragile thing. On the 15th day, riders appeared on the horizon. Not 1 or 2. A posse. At least 6 men, riding hard." Garrett recognized the man in the lead instantly. Sheriff Coleman. His stomach plummeted. Word had gotten out. "Stay inside," he told Marina, grabbing his rifle from its rack by the door. She shook her head, her jaw set in that familiar, stubborn line. She stood up, wincing as she put weight on her bad leg, and came to stand beside him on the porch. "No more hiding." The posse reined in their horses a few dozen yards from the cabin. Sheriff Coleman, a man whose face was a road map of tough years, dismounted slowly. His hand rested casually on his gun belt. It was not a friendly visit. "Thorne," the sheriff called out, his voice carrying in the still air. "We need to have a talk about your situation here." Garrett stepped off the porch, placing himself between the riders and Marina. "What situation would that be, Sheriff?" "Don't play dumb with me," Coleman said, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "You got a native girl living with you. Folks are concerned." One of the other men, a local rancher named Peterson whose face was pinched with malice, spoke up. "It ain't right, Thorne. Setting a bad example." "Folks should learn to mind their own damn business," Garrett said, his voice dangerously low. "She's my daughter." The words cut through the tension like a knife. Silence. The men exchanged shocked, disbelieving glances. "Your daughter?" Coleman repeated, his eyebrows shooting up. "My daughter," Garrett said again, his voice ringing with conviction. Born 20 years ago to a woman I loved, a woman who died protecting her. And now she's here, where she belongs. Peterson let out a harsh, ugly laugh. You expect us to believe that load of bull? That's when Marina stepped forward. She moved to stand beside Garrett, her head held high. In the harsh afternoon light, the resemblance was undeniable. The same height, the same defiant posture, the same storm-gray eyes. Believe what you want, Garrett said. But she is a thorn. She's under my protection. Any man who has a problem with that can take it up with me. Right now. His hand dropped, hovering just over the butt of his revolver. The deputies shifted in their saddles, their expressions uneasy. Garrett Thorne was not a man you crossed lightly. Sheriff Coleman was no fool. He'd been a lawman for 30 years. He knew the look of a liar, and he knew the look of a man telling a hard, unbelievable truth. He looked from Garrett's face to Marina's, seeing the shared lines of their jaws, the fierce pride in their eyes. He turned to Marina. Is this true, girl? She met his gaze without flinching. Her voice was clear, steady, and carried across the yard. He is my father. My mother loved him. She died keeping the secret that kept us both alive. But there are no more secrets. I am Marina Thorne. The name hung in the air. A claim, a challenge, a fact. Coleman let out a long, slow breath. This was a mess he didn't want. You got papers to prove it? We'll be riding to town tomorrow to file them, Garrett said. The sheriff looked at the angry, confused faces of the men behind him. He looked back at the father and daughter standing together, an unbreakable unit against the world. He'd seen enough. Town's going to talk, he warned. Let them talk, Garrett shot back. Coleman nodded slowly. He mounted his horse. See that you do file those papers, he said. Then he turned his horse and led his posse away. As the dust settled, Marina trembled, the adrenaline finally leaving her. Garrett put a strong arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. That was brave, he said. That was necessary, she replied. You teach me. Stand firm. Face truth. That night, they barely slept. They were a family now, in the eyes of the law and the world, for better or worse. The secret was out, and the consequences were just beginning. The next morning, they rode for town. Marina wore her cleanest dress, her hair braided with the turquoise beads that were her last link to her mother. As they rode down the main street, a hush fell over the town. Windows and doorways filled with staring faces. Whispers followed them like a cloud of insects. Garrett ignored them all. He led their horses straight to the land office and dismounted, helping Marina down with a steady hand. The clerk inside, a small man with wire-rimmed glasses, went pale when he saw them. Mr. Thorne, what can I do for you? I'm here to file papers of acknowledgement, Garrett said, his voice booming in the small office. This is my daughter, Marina Thorne. I'm claiming her legally as my heir. The clerk's jaw dropped. But she's my daughter, Garrett repeated, his voice like iron. Her mother was Maria of the Diné people, and Maria is gone. Now draw up the papers. The clerk hesitated, but one look at the thunder in Garrett's eyes sent him scrambling for the right forms. His pen scratched nervously across the page. Marina stood beside her father, her heart pounding, but her face was a calm, proud mask. You'll both need to sign, the clerk stammered, pushing the document across the desk. Garrett signed his name, the letters bold and clear. Then he passed the pen to Marina. In the evenings, he had been teaching her to write. Now her hand was steady as she carefully formed the letters of her new name. Marina Thorne. Just as Garrett placed the filing fee on the desk, the door burst open. It was Peterson, the hateful rancher from the day before. He had 2 other men with him, their faces twisted in rage. "This is an outrage!" Peterson roared. "We won't allow it! No Indian is inheriting a white man's land in this county!" Garrett's hand went to his gun, but before he could draw, Marina stepped forward. She faced the 3 men, her small frame filled with a sudden immense power. "I have every right," she said, her English clear and sharp as glass. "I am the daughter of Garrett Thorne and Maria of the Diné. I carry the blood of both. You say I should not exist. You say the love between my parents was wrong." Her voice rose, ringing with a power that stunned the room into silence. "My mother died to protect me from men like you. Men who hate what they do not understand. My father has claimed me. It is his right, and it is my right. You have no say in the matters of my family." Peterson was speechless, his jaw hanging open. Sheriff Coleman appeared in the doorway behind them. "Enough," he said, his voice flat. "The papers are filed. It's legal. Peterson, get out. This is a family matter, just like the girl said." Peterson glared, but he knew he was beaten. He spat on the floor and stalked out, his men trailing behind him. Coleman looked at Garrett and Marina with a new respect in his eyes. "You two got guts, I'll give you that. This isn't going to be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," Garrett replied. They walked out of the office and into the sunlight. The whispers and stares were still there, but they didn't matter anymore. They walked side by side, heads held high. Father and daughter. On the long ride home, as the sun began to dip toward the mountains, the ranch came into view. It wasn't just a piece of land anymore. It was home. A place forged by love and loss, and finally, by truth. Marina looked at her father, his weathered profile outlined against the vibrant sky. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being brave enough to claim me." Garrett pulled his horse to a stop. He reached over, pulling her into a fierce, one-armed embrace. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with 20 years of unspoken love, "for finding me." The lonely rancher was lonely no more. The lost daughter had finally come home. Their story started with a desperate plea for a piece of bread, but it had become a testament to the fact that family isn't just about blood. It's about the courage to claim one another, no matter the cost. What do you think is the most powerful kind of love? The love that holds on, or the love that lets go? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of the unexpected.